The world stopped for a moment on July 20, 2025. Malcolm-Jamal Warner, the beloved actor best known for his role as Theo Huxtable on The Cosby Show, had tragically passed away. The details felt surreal, drowned while on a family vacation in Costa Rica. And while fans across the world wept at the news, there was one voice that remained heartbreakingly quiet: Keshia Knight Pulliam. For weeks, the world waited in painful silence as Keshia Knight Pulliam, the beloved TV sister of Malcolm-Jamal Warner, said nothing about the heartbreaking news. But now, Keshia has finally opened up, and what she revealed is shocking, raw, and unlike anything anyone expected. Behind closed doors, away from flashing cameras and social media speculation, Keshia has shared details about Malcolm's final moments, the hidden struggles he faced, and the deep secret that only their closest circle knew. She is breaking the silence to tell the truth. Truths that challenge everything fans thought they knew about his death. What Keshia reveals will shock even the most devoted fans. She's not just mourning a co-star or childhood friend. She's revealing a side of Malcolm no one saw. This is the story no one else dared to tell, until now. Stay with us, because every word Keshia says shakes the foundation of what we thought was true about Malcolm-Jamal Warner's tragic death. In 1984, America met the Huxtables. The sitcom The Cosby Show premiered that fall and immediately reshaped television history. Among its many stars, two children stood out. Malcolm-Jamal Warner, just 14 years old, played Theo, the charming, mischievous teenage son. And by his side was the adorable, wide-eyed 5-year-old Rudy, portrayed by Keshia Knight Pulliam. From the moment they appeared on screen together, the chemistry was undeniable. They weren't just acting like siblings, they were siblings, in the truest emotional sense. Behind the cameras, something beautiful was unfolding. Warner, already navigating the pressure of teenage stardom, quickly took the younger Keshia under his wing. While others might have dismissed a child actor as too young to connect with, Malcolm didn't. He talked with her. He laughed with her. He protected her. And she in turn looked up to him, not just as a castmate, but as a big brother figure. Producers and crew members often commented on their dynamic. They were bonded, one longtime set hand recalled years later. You didn't have to direct the chemistry between Theo and Rudy. It was already there. They'd be whispering jokes between takes, laughing like real siblings. As the show soared in popularity, Malcolm and Keshia's lives became inseparable from their characters. For millions of fans, they were Theo and Rudy. But the magic of their relationship wasn't confined to the screen. It seeped into dressing rooms, studio lots, and press events. Even when the cameras weren't rolling, they gravitated toward each other. Malcolm offering wisdom and comfort, Keshia offering innocence and admiration. In a world that often devoured child stars and spit them out, the support they gave each other became a lifeline. They grew up under the same lights, in the same spotlight, navigating the same world that didn't always understand how young they really were. But they had each other. That was their anchor. When The Cosby Show ended in 1992, the cast scattered in different directions. Some went on to explore film, others stepped away from Hollywood altogether. But for Malcolm and Keshia, the end of the series wasn't the end of their relationship. If anything, it was just the beginning of a new chapter. Without the structure of weekly tapings or rehearsals, they began forging an even deeper personal connection. The cameras were gone, but the bond remained. Over the years, the two would reunite at events, award shows, and charity fundraisers. In every photo, Keshia would smile with that same warmth, and Malcolm would stand beside her with protective calm. They often spoke of each other with reverence in interviews. "He's my brother," Keshia said in one red carpet appearance. "Not just on TV. In real life too. Always has been." There were rumors over the years of cast tensions or disconnections between former co-stars, but not between these two. They were a constant in each other's lives. Malcolm cheered on Keshia when she graduated from Spelman College. Keshia celebrated when Malcolm won a Grammy for his spoken word performance. They weren't just colleagues in the same industry. They were family in a world that rarely allowed for lasting connection. Malcolm would occasionally appear on shows or panels discussing The Cosby Show, and when asked about Keshia, his face always lit up. "She's the real deal," he once told an interviewer. "We've been through so much together, on and off camera. She's more than a friend. She's my sister." Their bond never demanded publicity. It simply existed, quiet, consistent, and fiercely genuine. Over time, it evolved. What began as a teenage boy looking after a little girl transformed into two adults who understood each other more than words could ever explain. And as they both became parents, the bond only deepened. Fame is rarely kind to child stars. The spotlight, once so warm and promising, often becomes a prison. Malcolm and Keshia knew this too well. As they stepped away from the Cosby Show, they each faced the daunting task of reinventing themselves, not as Theo and Rudy, but as individuals with their own voices and paths. It wasn't easy. For Malcolm, the struggle was steep. Despite his talent and maturity, the shadow of Theo Huxtable loomed large. He turned to directing, poetry, and music. He explored the world of spoken word and jazz. He cultivated a quieter, more thoughtful career. But every step forward required pushing against the same wall, one built by childhood fame. Keshia's journey wasn't much different. Though she continued to act, she also pursued education, graduating from Spelman and finding her voice as a producer and philanthropist. But the weight of being Rudy never disappeared. In interviews, she often spoke about needing to find her own identity beyond the childhood role that had defined her life. Through it all, they leaned on each other. They'd text. They'd call. They'd show up for each other, not for a photo op, but because no one else could quite understand what they'd been through. That level of shared experience is rare. They had both stood at the intersection of fame and childhood and had somehow emerged whole. That kind of survival creates a bond stronger than most people ever experience. And while the public often speculated on romantic tension or chemistry between them, the truth was much deeper. They were soul siblings, tied not by blood, but by something more sacred, shared history, mutual respect, and a love forged under bright lights and constant pressure. As the years passed, both Malcolm and Keshia found themselves in a new chapter of life, parenthood. Malcolm became the proud father of a daughter, whose name and identity he kept out of the public eye to protect her privacy. Keshia, too, gave birth to a daughter and spoke openly about the joy and clarity motherhood brought her. What made their bond even more special in later years was that their daughters became friends. The two children, born just months apart, often played together during quiet get-togethers, away from Hollywood and away from the public gaze. Keshia once said in a private interview, "It's surreal watching our daughters grow up together. It's like a second generation of Theo and Rudy." 1 month before Malcolm's death, he invited Keshia onto his podcast. The episode was lighthearted, reflective, and deeply emotional in hindsight. They talked about growing up together, about being child stars, about navigating adulthood. They laughed. They teased. Malcolm referred to her as "my little sis for life," and they spoke of the bond their daughters shared, marveling at the beauty of life coming full circle. That podcast episode would become one of the last public conversations Malcolm would ever record. And for Keshia, it would become a living memory. His voice, his laugh, his words forever preserved in digital time. They captured decades of love, support, and siblinghood. Neither of them knew it would be their last exchange. But somehow, the conversation felt like a final chapter written just in time. It had been years since Malcolm-Jamal Warner and Keshia Knight Pulliam had shared a screen together, but their connection had never waned. In fact, just weeks before Warner's untimely passing, the two reunited, not on television or film, but in the intimate setting of a podcast. Malcolm had launched a series called Not All Hood, NH. A raw, honest podcast where he invited close friends and cultural figures to discuss life, art, parenting, and Black identity. It was personal, stripped down, and deeply reflective of who he had become in his 50s. When Keshia joined him as a guest, the conversation flowed as effortlessly as it always had between them. The two shared stories from the Cosby Show, chuckled about childhood antics on set, and discussed their respective paths since leaving the spotlight of the sitcom. They talked about parenthood most of all, how their daughters had become mirrors of their own childhoods, full of the same curiosity and wonder. During one segment, Malcolm paused, looked into the camera with a softness that had become characteristic of him in recent years, and said, "You know, Kesh, for all the years we've known each other, you've always been more than a little sister. Your family. Always have been. Always will be." Keshia smiled but didn't say anything for a few seconds. Her eyes welled up just a little. "You've always been my safe place, Malcolm. You made the chaos of childhood fame feel like home." The episode aired a few days later and quickly became one of the most shared and commented on episodes of the podcast. Fans loved seeing the two together again. But little did they know that this would be the last recorded moment of the two lifelong friends speaking to each other publicly. That podcast episode would later be replayed by millions, fans clinging to every word, trying to recapture the warmth and unspoken bond that had lasted for decades. After Warner's passing, clips from that interview resurfaced everywhere, on TikTok, Instagram, even mainstream news channels. It was no longer just a podcast, it had become a goodbye. Keshia later admitted she couldn't bring herself to watch the full episode again. "It's too much," she whispered in an interview weeks later. "His voice was always my calm. Now, it's a ghost." On the morning of July 20, 2025, Malcolm-Jamal Warner was on a well-earned vacation off the coast of Costa Rica. It was supposed to be a peaceful escape, a father-daughter trip that blended bonding, sunshine, and adventure. He had flown there with his wife and their daughter, hoping to carve out a memory-filled summer before returning to his commitments in the States. They had rented a small private villa not far from Playa Hermosa, a stretch of beach known for its wild beauty and, tragically, its unpredictable riptides. That day, the weather was picture-perfect: blue skies, warm breeze, the kind of day that seemed made for swimming. Malcolm, always the hands-on father, took his daughter into the shallow surf while his wife filmed from the shore. According to witnesses and local officials, the tide changed rapidly and without warning. What began as playful wading quickly became panic. A strong riptide pulled both Malcolm and his daughter further out into the ocean. Several beachgoers raced toward the water, and some brave souls swam out with flotation devices. Malcolm, realizing the danger, lifted his daughter high above the waves, trying to keep her head above water even as he struggled. He managed to push her toward one of the rescuers before a large wave struck him sideways. That was the last time he was seen above the surface. It took rescuers 14 minutes to recover his body. Efforts to resuscitate him were immediate, but unsuccessful. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The news broke within hours and spread like wildfire. In New York, Keshia was home when she got the call from a mutual friend. She didn't believe it at first. "There's no way," she said to her husband. "He just texted me last night." But as the reality settled in, a weight she'd never known took hold of her chest. She collapsed into a chair and stared at the floor in silence. The world had lost an actor, an activist, and a father. But Keshia had lost her soul brother. She canceled everything: the interviews, the events, the rehearsals. For days, she barely moved. Social media flooded with tributes, but from Keshia, there was nothing. Not a tweet, not a post. Just silence. In the days that followed Malcolm's death, the entertainment world found itself paralyzed by collective grief. Hollywood veterans, young actors, musicians, and fans across generations flooded timelines with photos and memories. But amidst all the noise, there was a conspicuous silence from one person whose voice everyone wanted to hear: Keshia Knight Pulliam. Reporters speculated. Some suggested she was simply too heartbroken to speak. Others claimed she was waiting for the family's blessing before saying anything publicly. But those close to her knew the truth. Keshia was drowning in a grief so deep, she could not yet find the words. She didn't leave her home. She didn't eat. She barely slept. Close friends came and went, leaving food at the door, watching her daughter for a few hours to give her space. Her husband held her hand in the dark as she wept for hours. When she finally did speak, her words were fragmented. "It's like losing my childhood," she whispered. "He was always there. Always." The media speculated when and how she would break her silence. They watched her Instagram like vultures, refreshing for any sign of a statement. But Keshia took her time. She wasn't interested in performance. When she finally decided to speak, it would be when she was ready, and when she could say something meaningful. 7 days after Malcolm-Jamal Warner's death, when Keshia Knight Pulliam finally broke her silence. There was no press conference. Just a quiet Instagram post. "A week ago I lost my big brother, but I gained an angel. I love you. I miss you. We got our girls." Within minutes, the post exploded. Celebrities and fans commented by the thousands. "We Got Our Girls" began trending across platforms. Former Cosby Show cast members reposted the video. The montage was replayed on morning shows and tribute specials. But beyond the reach of media, it struck the most personal of chords in those who had grown up with Theo and Rudy. When Keshia Knight Pulliam finally broke her silence, her voice didn't tremble. It echoed. The few words she shared carried weight far greater than their syllables. "We got our girls," she posted on her Instagram. The phrase caught immediate attention. What did she mean? Fans speculated, and while the public interpretation pointed clearly to a maternal, protective promise, those close to Keshia knew it went far deeper. That message wasn't performative, it was personal. "We Got Our Girls" wasn't just comfort to Malcolm's widow or daughter, it was a coded language born from decades of friendship. It was Keshia's silent pledge to step in, to be a godmother, a sister, a guardian, and a fierce protector to those he left behind. Keshia had always been intensely private, especially about the people closest to her. But this time, she let down her walls, not with a press conference, not with a televised appearance, but with one raw, powerful post. The words resonated with fans, with fellow actors, with anyone who'd seen the two grow up together on screen. Her tribute would come to symbolize something more than loss. It became an anchor, of memory, of gratitude, of love that surpasses death. She didn't just say goodbye. She said, "I'm still here. For you. For them." In the hours after Malcolm-Jamal Warner's death was confirmed, the world reacted in waves of disbelief and heartbreak. But for Keshia Knight Pulliam, those hours dissolved into a private storm. Sources close to her said she didn't speak for the first full day. She was inconsolable, one close friend said. Not just because of the loss, but because of the weight of the memories. They'd been through so much together. She cancelled all scheduled interviews. A pre-recorded podcast episode was taken down at her request. Media outlets reached out relentlessly, offering space for her to speak, to reflect, to grieve publicly. But she declined every invitation. Her silence wasn't avoidance, it was preservation. Keshia is someone who feels deeply, a family member shared. When someone like Malcolm dies, someone she knew not as a celebrity but as a brother, a friend, she doesn't perform that grief. She carries it. For more than a week, she said nothing publicly. But during that time, she reportedly visited Warner's family in Atlanta, arriving quietly, dressed in all black, sunglasses shielding the weight in her eyes. She didn't come for a photo op or a viral moment. She came to mourn, to support, and to hold his daughter in her arms. That's the first time she smiled, said a family friend, referring to Malcolm's little girl. When Keshia picked her up. It wasn't until the 9th day after his passing that she posted the now famous tribute. And even then, it was only because, according to friends, she wanted Malcolm's daughter to one day scroll through the archives of love and know that her father was cherished. She wanted her to see that she was seen too, said one source. That people were wrapping their hearts around her, even if she didn't understand all the headlines yet. Her silence, as it turned out, wasn't a void. It was a sacred space. A space where memories replayed, where sorrow poured freely, and where the words she finally chose would carry all the weight of the ones she hadn't spoken. From 1984 to 1992, American television audiences watched a miracle unfold on Thursday nights. It wasn't just the show itself, it was the chemistry between Malcolm-Jamal Warner's Theo and Keshia Knight Pulliam's Rudy. The sibling energy they shared on The Cosby Show felt real because in many ways, it was. Off-screen, their relationship reflected that same rhythm: playful teasing, protective instincts, shared laughter and mutual admiration. They grew up in front of America. Keshia was only 5 when the show began. Malcolm was 14. He helped her through reading lines and dealing with the pressures of stardom. She looked up to him not just because he was older, but because he treated her like an equal. "He never made me feel small," she once said in an interview. "He always made me feel powerful." Fans still quote scenes between the two characters, Theo teasing Rudy about her imaginary friend, or Rudy blackmailing Theo with stories about his secret girlfriend. Their comedic timing was impeccable. Their trust in one another, unshakable. Behind the cameras, Malcolm would often shield Keshia from the darker sides of the industry. "He saw what I couldn't at that age," she said. "He protected my light." That sibling bond didn't dissolve when the show ended. In adulthood, the two remained in touch, occasionally reuniting for panels, interviews, and private dinners. "We always picked up where we left off," Malcolm said during a 2020 reunion. "She's family. Always has been. Always will be." When he died, fans mourned the end of an era. But for Keshia, it wasn't nostalgia, it was deeply personal. "Losing him wasn't like losing a co-star," she said later. "It was like losing the brother I never had biologically, but always had in my heart." After the initial waves of grief passed, Keshia Knight Pulliam didn't retreat from the world. Instead, she found purpose in Malcolm's legacy. Friends say she threw herself into planning parts of his private memorial, coordinating with family to help organize a tribute that would reflect who he truly was, not just the actor, but the man, the father, the thinker, the quiet giver. Keshia was also seen supporting several children's foundations that Malcolm had championed in recent years. In lieu of flowers, she asked fans to donate to causes aligned with Malcolm's values: music education for underserved youth, support for single fathers, and mental health awareness in the Black community. "If you want to honor Malcolm," she said in one post, "help someone who feels unseen." She reportedly helped coordinate a tribute video that was shown during a closed-door memorial event, featuring clips of Malcolm's performances, behind-the-scenes moments with the Cosby Show cast, and testimonials from those who had worked with him in recent years. Her voice opened the video. He didn't need to shout to be heard. His presence was enough. His love was enough. According to friends, she also quietly resumed work on a children's literacy initiative she and Malcolm had once casually brainstormed. Though the project never launched in his lifetime, she vowed to carry the torch. "It was something he wanted to do," she said. "Now it's something I will do. For him. For our girls. For the next Theo and Rudy out there, just waiting for someone to believe in them." Keshia Knight Pulliam didn't just honor Malcolm-Jamal Warner in memory. She honored him through motion, through intention, through a love that refused to be extinguished, even by death. For Keshia Knight Pulliam, the word brother transcended biology. It was a chosen family bond forged through decades of shared experiences, trials and triumphs. From the moment she first stepped onto the set of The Cosby Show as a wide-eyed 5-year-old, Malcolm-Jamal Warner became more than a co-star. He became a constant presence, a steady hand guiding her through the complex world of childhood fame. In countless interviews, Keshia described Malcolm as a protector and confidant, someone who quietly watched out for her when the pressures of the industry became overwhelming. "He was my rock," she once reflected, "the brother I didn't have but always needed." Their relationship was a testament to the power of chosen family, how deep bonds can be formed beyond blood ties, shaped instead by love, respect, and shared history. Comparing their connection to other famous sibling duos on television, like the dynamic between Fred Savage and Danica McKellar on The Wonder Years or the sibling camaraderie in Full House, Keshia emphasized the authenticity of her bond with Malcolm. "There was no acting needed between us," she said. "We were family on and off screen. That kind of bond is rare. It's irreplaceable." In reflecting on their years together, Keshia often spoke about the unique role Malcolm played in her life, not just as a childhood protector but as a lifelong brother. He had seen her grow from a child into a woman, from an actress into a mother, and through it all, he remained unwavering in his support. Their connection was the kind that survives time, distance, and even tragedy. Following Malcolm-Jamal Warner's passing, Keshia found herself stepping into a new role, one of guardian not only to his memory but to the legacy he left behind. The grief was profound, but with it came a fierce determination. She understood that the love and lessons Malcolm imparted could not be confined to the past, they needed to be carried forward. Friends and insiders revealed that Keshia began exploring ways to honor Malcolm beyond words. Discussions emerged about a memoir she might write, chronicling their shared journey from childhood fame to adulthood and loss. There were also conversations about establishing a foundation focused on children's literacy and fatherhood initiatives, causes close to Malcolm's heart in his later years. "He lived for his daughter," Keshia said in a rare interview, her voice thick with emotion. "Now, I live to uphold that legacy. To ensure his love, his values, and his dreams continue through the lives of those he cared for most." In private moments, she spoke about the responsibility she felt, not as a performer or celebrity, but as a sister. "We got our girls," she repeated, the phrase becoming a personal mantra. Protecting and nurturing Malcolm's daughter, supporting his family, and preserving his memory became her mission. Keshia's commitment was not just to remembrance but to action, transforming grief into purpose. Through her efforts, she aimed to ensure that Malcolm-Jamal Warner's spirit lived on in tangible ways, inspiring new generations just as he had inspired her. In the quiet hours just days before Malcolm-Jamal Warner's tragic passing, Keshia Knight Pulliam received what would become their final conversation. The call wasn't planned, it was one of those spontaneous moments born from deep connection, when two people don't need an occasion to reach out. They spoke as they always had, warmly, with laughter sprinkled between words, sharing updates about their daughters, reminiscing about childhood, and dreaming about future reunions. Keshia remembers that last call vividly. Malcolm's voice was calm but carried his signature kindness, the gentle strength that had comforted her since they were children on set. They joked about their podcast episode, laughed at memories of missed cues during filming, and spoke candidly about the pressures of balancing fame and family. Little did she know, those would be the last words she'd hear from him. The final moments captured on a phone line now carry a bittersweet weight, both a haunting reminder of what was lost and a precious comfort. "When I feel overwhelmed, I replay that call in my mind," Keshia shared. "His laughter, the way he said my name, it grounds me. It reminds me that he's still here, in every way that matters." Holding on to that voice, that laughter, and the essence of their friendship has become a lifeline. Though Malcolm is gone, Keshia knows their bond transcends time and space. In every conversation she shares with her daughter, every quiet moment of reflection, she feels the presence of her brother. Their love a beacon guiding her through the darkest nights. Thank you for joining this journey into the heartfelt story of Keshia Knight Pulliam and Malcolm-Jamal Warner. If you found this video meaningful, please like and subscribe to stay connected with more videos that touch the heart and honor legacies.